You think we live in a simulation, right? You think we live in a simulation, right?
Yeah.
Like 100% certain about it, or
That's the most likely. It's the most likely thing.
okay.
Because like after a while, you are going to make a simulation for other things, and since probably the time as we know it is infinite, and I'm not even sure if this is a construct within a simulation or is it just like an inherent thing that happens everywhere. Because like you can make a simulation like very easy simulation, right? Like the Conway's game of life. If you maybe you've heard about this, maybe you haven't. It's basically like a cell automata, and there are like very easy rules. So you start from like a grid, and you have certain ones of these grids that have like a set bit or 1 in them, and then the rest of are 0. And then there are like very easy rules to convert from a certain grid position to another one. I don't remember the rules, to be honest, but I will try my best. It is something like, oh well, if you have 3 bits adjacent, so imagine a grid. If adjacent to this cell we have 3 different cells that are also on, this cell is going to stay on, or something like that. If it's 4, then it's going to turn back off. If it's 1, then it's going to also, like, if there are a clump of like 2 cells next to each other, they're just going to, for example, die or something like that. But if it's like 2, so there are a bunch of different rules about it. All right. And you can make very, very complex stuff with this game of life. You actually, it's provable. And actually, let me actually search this up, because I don't want to I want to actually say the correct rules. Okay, so any live cell with fewer than 2 live neighbors dies. It's kind of like if it's underpopulated.
Yeah.
So if we have, for example, just 2 live cells next to each other, they both die, because this guy has only 1 neighbor, this guy has only 1 neighbor, so they both die.
And then that's it.
That's it. So this clump, maybe there are like other cells, other places, but this clump just dies, right? Second rule, any live cell with 2 or 3 live neighbors lives to the next generation. So say if we have like 3 in a line, this middle one is going to live because it has like 2.
And they'll reproduce.
No, they won't reproduce.
Okay.
Any live cell with more than 3, so 4, will die as if by overpopulation. Right? So it's kind of like a stuck. So if you have a cell that is like, say if you have a plus sign in a way, this middle one is going to die because it has 4 neighbors.
Okay.
And neighbor is every cell on the 8, it basically has 8 neighbors. So diagonal neighbors are also considered. So you can be a neighbor of not only right, left, down, and up. You can also be like top down, bottom left, and so on. Third one, any live cell with more than, well, I said this one actually. And 4, any dead cell with exactly 3 live neighbors, exactly 3, will become a live cell, as if by reproduction. So these are the 4 rules, very simple rules. Encoding these rules, remembering these, is obviously difficult because I didn't. But it is easy if you try to remember it, right? Like, so there are 4 rules. Now as I know it, I can recall it pretty quickly. The first one is the underpopulation rule. So if a cell has less than 2 live cells in the neighbors, will die. The second thing is if a live cell has 2 or 3 neighbors, it will stay live. If it has more than 3, so 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8, it will die because of overpopulation. And if a dead cell has 3 live cells neighboring to it, it will kind of switch back to life. And that's the game of life. Now, you can run simulations with some starting positions to see what will happen. First things first, this game happens to be Turing complete. What is Turing completeness? This dude called Alan Turing, he had like this theory about computers and like what a computability and all of that. So there was this machine, like very, very simple machine called the Turing machine that had like very, very simple operations. And he proved that if you can do this kind of things with this very simple machine called the Turing machine, you can compute anything. And in a way, by proving, so right now, in order to prove the completeness of like a compute system, what they are doing is, like mathematicians try to reduce a problem from its original sense to Turing machine and say that they are kind of equivalent. So if you can prove that these two are equivalent, since Turing machines and like your modern computer is a Turing complete machine, it can do anything that a Turing machine can do. There is a little caveat, but we'll not get into it. So the thing is, you can turn this game of life into a Turing machine. So it's Turing complete. Technically speaking, if you have a large enough grid, you can run Overwatch on it. Like, that's a crazy thing to say, but technically with only these rules. So the rules were underpopulation, overpopulation, staying the same, and like reproduction, right? 4 rules. With these 4 rules, you can simulate everything that your computer does. So there are cool things that you can create with this grid, just without going all bonkers. So there are people who like created computers with that. It's kind of like similar to how you would create some stuff with like Minecraft, but in a very simpler game. And you can, for example, make there are interesting things that can, for example, move. So there is like an easy way to make something that kind of moves in the board. So it kind of like flips and moves. And then you can use these constructs in order to make very, very complex constructions. You can go and search about it or watch some YouTube videos and so on. But the idea is that, okay, it's very interesting, it's very powerful. So given this very simple thing and being this powerful, I think that there is a possibility for this world to be a generative function. So because if it's not a generative function, if it's not being generated, if everything is like requires some sort of a parameter, then I think that we will run out of parameters. We will run out of memory in the universe. We'll run out of data that we can possibly encode to say about any single moment, to predict any single moment of the entire universe.
So this is why the universe dies, basically, in your theory.
It's not about the fact that the universe dies. It's about the fact that, can you encode everything in the universe? Can you like give me however big of a number, say, that can produce the state of the universe? Or is it a generative thing?
But is that running, though? Is all of the universe running at the same time? Or is it like, let's say I'm playing Red Dead Redemption and it's like the world exists, but it's not processed at any given time.
But
my field of...
Okay, I get what you're saying. But what happens is, in Red Dead Redemption, you have the data for every place.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, that would be too much data for anything to handle. For the universe itself to handle the amount of data. Like, what is this base thing that that you have in the universe, like whatever electron, even go further, I don't know, whatever the thing, bosons, or I don't know. Whatever that base thing is, there is like a bunch of data about itself. So like storing all of that information within the system itself, that would be bonkers.
Then maybe the rest doesn't exist. Maybe the rest is just illusion.
I think that this whole thing is a generative function.
Mm-hmm.
And that can explain a bunch of different stuff. If we are playing something like Game of Life, it is Game of Life, but very complex that you can't make sense of it. And the challenge is to find that function that kind of runs, like gets the previous state, does something with it, and then produces the next one. There are people who are trying to find that, and in general, it's very interesting to think about this universe to be as a very discrete thing, which we assume that is continuous. And I think that it, like, real numbers don't make any sense to me. I'm a computer scientist, so real numbers don't make any sense to me. When I'm in computer science, when you try to like represent a real number, you have this weird things with bits and all of that. Like you can't like represent a real number like accurately. Like you can use strings and whatnot, right? But like at the end, like how can you represent pi accurately? Like there are numbers that you just cannot represent accurately. So to me, this inaccuracy is not like a problem for like about with the computers that we have or anything like that. I think that this is just something that we take for granted, that like this exists, and there are like a lot of mathematics and physics that are talking about this continuous stuff, versus inherently I think universe is discrete. So the way that I think about it is like, okay, what is the Planck constant? I'm just going to, I don't know, Google it. Like, what is the Planck constant? So basically, the Planck length is derived from the speed of light, the Planck constant, and so on. The Planck length is, and I'm saying Planck constant by mistake. Planck constant is another thing, but it is derived from that, is 1.6 times 10 to the power of minus 35 meters.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the smallest distance about which current experimentally corroborated models of physics can make meaningful statements.
Mm-hmm.
So anything below this length, what is it? Isn't length continuous? It's like we can't talk about anything below this length currently. It's like 1.6 times 10 to the power of minus 35. We can't go any lower than this. So what if you take this as a 1 unit and then everything else is discrete? And then you, all of a sudden, it's no longer like, oh, well, we can't really get to the correct number of pi. Then we have an exact number for pi. Because this radius thing that is like pi times something is actually, okay, like it's a discrete line that is like tick, 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 tick. Mm-hmm. It's like you can't see it because it's 1.6 times 10 to the power of minus 6, but it's an exact number. It's not like just something arbitrary. And so we are just encoded in this space that is actually discrete. And if that's the case, then we could just be generated by some generator function, some sort of a Turing machine that is running this entire universe. And we are making another Turing machine within the Turing machine.
Which is something.
Which is, for example, like computer.
Okay.
And then you can make a Turing machine simulator inside your computer. No problem.
We already do like a primitive version of it.
No. We are doing, we can do like a Turing machine within our Turing machine and then another Turing machine within that. Like that's very possible.
Do you think we can simulate something resembling the universe that we have here in a simulation?
It doesn't have to be that. That's the big
to be
issue.
More interesting.
That's the big issue. No. Actually, it doesn't have to be that. It can just be an incremental thing. It doesn't have to be a simulation that is like all of a sudden like very interesting and like more complex than our own universe. It doesn't have to be.
We are sort of taking the incremental steps.
And it's fine, and it's good enough for you to kind of realize.
Okay.
Like right now, when you think about people who thought that the Earth is flat, is like, oh well, didn't they look at the sky and see sun and moon, and they were like circular? Didn't they see like Mercury once in a blue moon, like, and it was circular? Didn't they look up in the sky, see everything was like a sphere? And then they thought that they are the only flat thing. This sounds maybe ridiculous to you. And I'm not like assuming that my theory is like 100% correct. But like if you look at it, if you look at the world and you look at the things that we are doing, with the things that we are simulating, it kind of makes sense that this is also a simulation.
I agree with you. But I mean, we can't disprove it, but it's the most convincing argument about the nature of the universe that I've heard.
Yeah. And physicists and all of that, like they are trying to tackle this problem from another side. They're trying to find the rules about this simulation. What I'm saying is that like when you start to, well, I mean, to mathematically understand it, this is completely fine, because like when you have this such a small constant of 10 times minus 35, 10 to the power of minus 35, that is such a small constant that of course you can like integrate a function, because like that's the kind of the idea behind integrating. You take like a very small constant and like, you integrate something. So when you are integrating something that you feel like as though it was continuous, it is like, it doesn't matter to your brain or like you with a big accuracy of a number to really think about it as something that is, say, something that is continuous or something that is discrete but with the steps of 10 to the power of minus 35. Like it doesn't really make a difference for your day-to-day job or engineering. It really doesn't. And actually the best way to go about it is to use these continuous mathematical building blocks that we already have. That's the best thing that we can do, because who wants to sum, like for example, the function, but the way that they want to do it is to go every step of 10 to the power of minus 3. Like they go one by one, they like evaluate all of these, and then instead of like integrating, they like go through each one of these steps and like calculate this function, the sum of function over a specific range. So no one wants to do that, and no need to do it. You can just integrate it. But what I'm saying is that don't let this integrating and having all of these sorts of continuous functions in the world necessarily convince you that everything is continuous. There are cases that I think that it should be made that we are not necessarily living in a continuous world. So you can't forever kind of divide 2 points. There's this like old thing, is like kind of some sort of a paradox that is like, I don't know, there is this turtle that is moving, and then there is this rabbit that is getting closer to the turtle. Say that whatever number of seconds, it kind of halves the distance it has with the turtle, and the turtle is like moving very slowly. The idea is that it never reaches the turtle. In real world, you see that the rabbit passes the turtle. But in the mathematical model, you're adding half plus a quarter plus an eighth plus a 16th and so on. And this is converging to 1, but never really reaching even 1 and not beyond it.
Do you think it's dangerous to share this theory of simulation? Because I have this fear that once we spread this enough, and once, let's say in 100 years, enough people are convinced, then some crazy motherfucker, I think GeoHot is trying to already do this. Some motherfucker will try to break out of it. And once they break out of it, this simulation.
But how do you break out of it?
Or somehow change the fabric.
I mean, there is a huge question about it. This is just like a very, very basic theory. And I'm not the person who generated this theory. People think about this. But I don't know how we can exploit it at this point.
I mean,
there is no exploitation.
Somehow changing the source code. I don't
ver-
even,
ver-
it's like a 5-year-old
I have no
theory.
idea. I have no idea. Yeah. So the thing is, like, it is very complex to try and, for example, I don't know, change a single bit of the universe in a way, if, like, just for the lack of a better term to discuss about this. It's very complex to like change a single bit of the universe. Like, whatever action you do changes like a shitload of things.
Mm-hmm.